Faith has led many artists to reevaluate their priorities, and there have been numerous instances where beloved performers decided to step away from the limelight to devote themselves fully to their spiritual journeys. Fame can be intoxicating, yet it can also create a void that material success fails to fill. When these artists experienced a deep calling, they discovered that their relationship with God took precedence over accolades, record deals, and worldwide recognition. Their stories are diverse, reflecting unique backgrounds and paths, but each narrative offers insight into the way faith can radically alter a person's life. The decision to leave a successful music career is never easy, especially when fans in the industry clamor for more hits. Yet these individuals found a greater purpose, and that sense of purpose guided them toward a life aligned more closely with their beliefs. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Mason Mays Betha stood at the top of the rap world in the late 1990s. He was signed to Sean Diddy Combs' Bad Boy Records, and his laid-back flow, combined with his melodic delivery, made him a staple on radio stations everywhere. Few could have predicted he would give it all up just a few years after he achieved multi-platinum success. At the peak of his popularity, Mace announced he was leaving music to follow a calling to the ministry. His fans were stunned, as his songs were on constant rotation and his brand had grown immensely. Yet he felt an emptiness behind the scenes and believed that devoting himself to a life of preaching would fill that void in a way money and fame never could. Though he later returned briefly to record new material, his spiritual conviction remained a guiding force, and the transformation that began when he left the music industry would define him more than any hit record. Montel Jordan epitomized R&B cool in the mid-1990s. His breakout track dominated charts and dance floors, cementing him as one of the signature voices of the era. With smooth vocals and a confident presence, Jordan enjoyed a series of hit songs that kept him in the public eye. Yet deep within, he felt a pull that extended beyond the typical goals of a chart-topping musician. After reaching considerable success, he realized he was being called to serve in ministry. That realization collided with the demands of a recording artist's schedule, culminating in a crossroads where Jordan chose God over further stardom. He became a worship pastor and redirected his musical talents toward gospel settings, leading congregations in worship rather than entertaining massive secular audiences. The decision involved financial sacrifices and the need to shift from mainstream superstardom to a more humble role, but it gave him a fulfillment he had not experienced before. Denise Matthews, once known worldwide as Vanity, emerged in the early 1980s with a stage persona as bold as her name implied. Protégé of Prince, she led the group Vanity 6 and later pursued a solo career. She was known for her striking beauty, provocative performances, and the edgy pop-funk sound that Prince was famous for cultivating. At one time, she embodied the glitz and glamour of the early MTV era. Yet behind the provocative images and music videos was a woman fighting personal demons. Substance abuse and health crises mounted, pushing her to the brink. In a moment of desperation, she experienced a profound spiritual awakening that inspired her to renounce her stage name, Vanity, and embrace a life in service to God as Denise. She abandoned the secular music scene, devoting the rest of her life to sharing her testimony and warning others about the pitfalls of fame. Her transformation became a powerful story of redemption, one that highlighted her unwavering belief that divine intervention saved her from a life that nearly killed her. Brian "Head" Welch rose to prominence as a guitarist in the influential nu metal band Korn. Known for heavy riffs, intense lyrics, and a raw stage presence, Korn revolutionized the metal scene in the mid to late 1990s. Welch enjoyed global tours, lucrative record deals, and the riotous adoration of a passionate fan base. Underneath the surface, he battled addiction and found himself in a constant state of turmoil. The frenetic pace of tours and the trappings of rock stardom left him feeling hollow. In a dramatic move, he announced he was leaving the band after discovering a deep Christian faith that changed his perspective on life. Baptizing himself in the Jordan River, he renounced his self-destructive habits and dedicated himself to raising his daughter free from the influences that once plagued him. Although he later reconciled with his former bandmates and rejoined Korn, his life's trajectory had been permanently altered by that defining moment of leaving for God, and his perspective on music became a vehicle for sharing his testimony of hope. Lacey Sturm fronted the rock band Flyleaf, whose emotive performances and passionate lyrics earned them a devoted following. Her vocal range, combined with intense stage presence, allowed the band to stand out in a crowded rock scene. Despite success, Sturm found herself grappling with despair and a sense that her life lacked meaning. She turned to faith during her darkest hours, and the shift was profound enough that she felt compelled to step away from Flyleaf at the peak of the band's popularity. Devoting her voice to Christian music and personal ministry, she used her platform to reach out to others struggling with depression and hopelessness. The raw vulnerability in her story, coupled with her courageous choice to walk away from a rising career, resonated with fans. Sturm never disowned her musical roots, but her purpose transformed, and she became a beacon for those seeking spiritual solace. Cat Stevens, who later adopted the name Yusuf Islam, rose to fame in the late 1960s and early 1970s with a series of folk rock hits that showcased his introspective songwriting and gentle melodies. Songs like Wild World and Father and Son became global anthems, cementing his place among the era's most influential singer-songwriters. Despite adoration from fans worldwide, he felt a continuous spiritual restlessness that wasn't satisfied by accolades or wealth. After a near-drowning experience, he was moved to explore faith more deeply. Discovering Islam led him to change his name and walk away from the music scene to focus on religious education and philanthropy. For decades, he refrained from performing secular music and concentrated on charitable causes, becoming a prominent figure in interfaith dialogues. Eventually, he returned to recording and performing, but on his own terms, ensuring that his work aligned with his spiritual values. His journey showed how a pivotal life event can shift priorities so powerfully that global recognition becomes secondary to spiritual conviction. Al Green reigned as one of the most iconic voices in soul music during the 1970s. His smooth, soulful renditions of songs like Let's Stay Together became staples on radio and wedding playlists around the world. At the height of his fame, he underwent a spiritual transformation that redirected him away from secular hits. A traumatic personal incident, combined with an ever-growing sense that he needed something greater, convinced him to become a pastor. Embracing the gospel tradition that had shaped him from childhood, he purchased a church in Memphis and poured his energy into preaching and singing about God's love. While he did eventually return to recording some secular-leaning songs, his heart found peace in ministry, and his persona was forever marked by the spiritual shift. Even when he recorded later albums, the themes of faith and redemption were unmistakable, showing that his walk with God informed every note he sang. Little Richard, born Richard Wayne Penniman, was a foundational figure in the birth of rock and roll. His flamboyant style, energetic performances, and electrifying piano playing influenced generations of musicians. Known for pioneering hits like Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally, he was a force of nature on stage. Yet he famously walked away from rock and roll in the late 1950s after a life-altering spiritual experience. He enrolled in Bible college and became a traveling evangelist, preaching against the lifestyle he once embodied. Though he later returned to secular music multiple times, his internal battle between worldly success and religious devotion persisted throughout his life. He would go from charting hits and performing at major venues to renouncing the industry again in favor of gospel. The tension between these worlds defined much of his legacy, but his commitment to his faith remained the steady thread that guided him whenever he felt overwhelmed by fame. Craig Mack burst onto the hip-hop scene in the mid-1990s as a member of Diddy's Bad Boy label. Best known for the iconic track Flava in Ya Ear, he played a key role in establishing Bad Boy's early dominance. His unique voice and vibrant style made him a memorable figure in rap's golden era. However, his career took an unexpected turn after his initial success. Disillusioned with the industry and seeking deeper meaning, he eventually stepped away to dedicate himself to a Christian ministry. He quietly removed himself from the mainstream spotlight, opting for a life of spiritual reflection rather than one defined by studio sessions and public performances. News of his new life caught many fans by surprise, but it underscored the idea that the lure of the spotlight often fades when true spiritual transformation occurs. Michelle Williams gained worldwide prominence as part of Destiny's Child, one of the best-selling girl groups of all time. Their hits topped charts globally, and Williams, along with bandmates Beyoncé Knowles and Kelly Rowland, enjoyed immense commercial success. Even during her tenure with the group, she felt a tug toward her gospel roots. When the group disbanded, Williams took the opportunity to pursue a path in gospel music, releasing albums that revealed a deep commitment to sharing her faith through her artistry. Although she didn't completely sever ties with secular music, occasionally dabbling in theater and other projects, her pivot showed that she valued using her talent to uplift and inspire through messages of hope and faith. She also became an advocate for mental health awareness in the Christian community, demonstrating that the choice to follow God's calling can manifest in multiple ways beyond simply leaving or staying in the spotlight. Cheryl Coco Gamble rose to fame as the lead singer of SWV Sisters with Voices. SWV became a leading R&B group in the 1990s, known for hits like Weak and Right Here Human Nature. Coco's powerful vocals stood out, propelling the group to stardom. Yet the journey wasn't without tension for her, as she felt an ever-present pull toward the gospel roots she'd nurtured as a child. Once SWV's success began to wane, she saw an opportunity to step into her calling by releasing gospel albums and focusing on Christian ministry. Although she participated in SWV's reunions and continued to celebrate the group's legacy, her creative direction remained intertwined with her faith. The shift didn't diminish her vocal prowess. Rather, it allowed her to showcase it in a context that was personally fulfilling and spiritually aligned with her deepest convictions. Chris Hillman first made his mark as a member of the Byrds, one of the most influential bands of the 1960s. Their fusion of folk and rock, combined with introspective lyricism, inspired countless artists. Hillman later played a pivotal role in creating the country rock movement through groups like the Flying Burrito Brothers. Despite success, there came a time when he felt drawn toward the Christian faith in a way that changed his perspective on performing and recording. While he didn't always completely disappear from music, his devotion to God influenced the material he chose to create and the manner in which he toured. This quieter, more measured approach was a form of leaving behind the frenetic chase for stardom. His personal convictions guided him to incorporate spiritual themes into his work, offering him a sense of peace and stability that once seemed elusive in the chaotic music world. Mark Farner was the frontman of Grand Funk Railroad, a band that achieved monumental success in the 1970s with its powerful rock anthems. Concerts sold out, radio stations blasted their hits, and Farner became a recognizable figure in the rock community. Yet along the way, he encountered a spiritual awakening that reshaped his worldview. He chose to leave the mainstream rock circuit and focus on Christian music, using his voice and his songwriting to proclaim his faith. The transition was noticeable as fans accustomed to raw rock riffs now heard messages of hope and salvation. Farner's decision wasn't merely a rebranding, it was an authentic shift in mission. He eventually found ways to blend the classic Grand Funk material with faith-infused music during his live shows, proving that a musician can honor past accomplishments while wholeheartedly dedicating new works to a divine calling. Barry McGuire was already a notable folk rock musician when his protest song Eve of Destruction took the world by storm in 1965. He became a spokesperson for a generation questioning authority and seeking social change. Though the track brought him fame, McGuire grappled with inner turmoil and spiritual questions that the counterculture movement didn't fully address. He discovered Christianity, and that transformative moment led him to abandon mainstream folk rock. Redirecting his songwriting and performances, he became a Christian musician known for praising God with the same intensity he once used to critique societal injustices. This shift caused some to label him a dropout from the protest scene. Yet to McGuire, it was a natural progression from disillusionment to spiritual fulfillment. He spent subsequent decades performing gospel-focused material and sharing his testimony in churches around the globe. Dan Peek was a founding member of the band America, famous for such hits as A Horse with No Name and Sister Golden Hair. Their soothing harmonies and acoustic-driven style made them an international success. Peek enjoyed this acclaim, but internal struggles and a search for meaning led him toward Christianity. He stepped away from America and recorded contemporary Christian music instead, channeling his refined sense of melody into worship. Fans who followed his journey discovered an artist who had found a new kind of peace that secular success hadn't provided. By dedicating his talents to faith-based music, Peek illustrated how even at the height of one's career, a deeper longing can redirect life's trajectory and place spiritual harmony above chart positions. Dion DiMucci, often known simply as Dion, built his reputation in the late 1950s and early 1960s with hits like The Wanderer and Runaround Sue. He was one of the era's most influential rock and roll vocalists, captivating audiences with his streetwise swagger and infectious melodies. Despite his success, he battled addiction and an existential longing that fame could not resolve. Finding renewal through faith in Jesus, Dion shifted away from the rock lifestyle and spent significant periods focusing on Christian music and ministry. Although he would occasionally re-emerge with secular albums, the spiritual pivot remained evident in his life's story. He spoke openly about the freedom he found in Christ, emphasizing that his conversion provided the hope he lacked during his darkest periods. David Ellefson became well known as the bassist for the pioneering thrash metal band Megadeth. The group's punishing sound and intense live shows earned a devoted global following. Ellefson's journey through addiction and recovery led him to rediscover the Christian faith he'd known in childhood. While he didn't completely vanish from the music scene, he radically adjusted his approach to life on the road. His sobriety and renewed spiritual outlook translated into various ministries, including efforts to inspire fellow musicians struggling with substance abuse. Though he periodically returned to the stage, his identity shifted significantly, reflecting a priority on living out his faith rather than indulging in the excesses that often come with heavy metal fame. John Michael Talbot started his musical journey as a member of the country folk ensemble Mason Prophet in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The band was on the cusp of mainstream recognition, but Talbot felt drawn to spiritual contemplation. A conversion to Christianity, specifically Roman Catholicism, altered his life so profoundly that he joined a religious order. He became a lay monk, dedicating his days to prayer, simplicity, and service. Music didn't vanish entirely from his life, but it shifted from commercial pursuits to worship. He composed and performed hymns, releasing contemplative albums that aimed to draw listeners closer to God. The serenity in his recordings stands in stark contrast to the typical hustle of the entertainment world, a testament to a man who left behind potential secular stardom to embrace a life anchored in contemplative faith. Stacey Lattisaw was an R&B sensation, achieving success with hits throughout the 1980s. Her voice matured quickly, and she found herself touring and recording while still a teenager. Lattisaw eventually reached a stage where the industry's demands seemed out of sync with the direction her life was taking. She experienced a growing desire to dedicate herself to church ministry and family. By stepping away from recording deals and the rigors of promotion, she immersed herself more completely in Christian life. She occasionally performed gospel music, but the choice to remove herself from the mainstream R&B circuit demonstrated that her spiritual well-being and connection to God were ultimately more important than trying to maintain celebrity status. Chynna Phillips emerged in the late 1980s as part of Wilson Phillips alongside her childhood friends Carney and Wendy Wilson. The group's harmonies and relatable pop tunes earned them chart-topping success. Phillips's life, however, was marked by personal trials and a deep search for meaning. As she struggled with anxiety and marital challenges, she found solace in the Christian faith. Though she didn't entirely leave show business forever, there were pivotal periods when she stepped away to focus on spiritual growth and religious community. She spoke openly in interviews about the comfort she found in prayer and the extent to which her faith gave her renewed purpose. The shift illustrated a woman who, despite being raised amid Hollywood glamour, chose a path guided by scripture and spiritual fellowship. Reginald Fieldy Arvizu of Korn experienced a faith transformation similar to that of his bandmate, Brian Head Welch. Korn's music was synonymous with angst, aggression, and raw energy, which resonated with countless fans worldwide. Fieldy indulged in the vices that often come with rock success, struggling with addiction and fractured relationships. Witnessing Welch's turnaround and going through personal trials of his own led Fieldy to embrace Christianity. Though he remained within the band, his lifestyle changed drastically. The reckless partying gave way to sobriety and Bible study, turning him into a more introspective musician. While not completely exiting the music industry, Fieldy credits God for altering his priorities, showing that leaving can sometimes be metaphorical, leaving behind the destructive behaviors that once defined one's place in the scene. Prince, known for his boundary-pushing style, virtuosic musicianship, and anthems that redefined pop culture, surprised fans when he had a major spiritual shift in the late 1990s and early 2000s. He became a Jehovah's Witness, a transformation that affected not only his personal life, but also his musical output. Lyrics referencing explicit themes or controversial topics took a back seat to more spiritually aware content. Though he never fully removed himself from the music world, continuing to release albums and tour, he significantly toned down the overtly sexual stage persona that had been his trademark. He devoted time to door-to-door ministry, in keeping with his faith, and allowed religious conviction to guide his decisions about what kind of music he would create and how he presented it to the world. His story reveals a nuanced journey where an artist remained active but undeniably left behind the persona that first made him legendary. George Harrison, while never fully stepping away from recording, reoriented much of his life and artistic focus after embracing Hindu spirituality. As a member of the Beatles, Harrison had become arguably the most famous guitarist in the world. Yet during the mid-1960s, he cultivated a deep fascination with Eastern religion, studying under Indian gurus and incorporating spiritual themes into his music. His solo work, particularly after the Beatles disbanded, frequently included devotional content, most famously My Sweet Lord, which was a testament to his longing for a higher connection. Even though he didn't remove himself entirely from the public eye, the direction of his life and music took a distinct turn away from traditional rock star excess. Instead of living for sold-out arenas and chart positions, he channeled his resources and influence into spiritual causes, philanthropic endeavors, and personal reflection, effectively leaving behind the conventional measures of success that once defined the Beatles phenomenon. Vanity's former collaborator Prince was not the only superstar associated with him to experience a strong calling away from the music industry. Sheila E., though she never fully abandoned music, turned increasingly toward a faith-based life after grappling with the pressures of fame. She spent a portion of her career in ministry work, focusing on charity and spiritual outreach. Her father, a devout Christian, had a profound influence on her, and she often credited her family's faith for pulling her through health scares and emotional lows. While still recording and touring from time to time, she aligned her performances more closely with her beliefs. Her philanthropic efforts and testimony about overcoming adversity highlight a life that placed faith above industry expectations, showcasing yet another example of how spiritual convictions can temper the wild pace of a once all-consuming career. MC Hammer catapulted to fame in the early 1990s with hits like You Can't Touch This and Too Legit to Quit, achieving a level of mainstream popularity rarely seen by rappers at the time. However, his extravagant spending and financial missteps led to bankruptcy. Amid this turmoil, he found renewed purpose and faith. He became an ordained minister, preaching and using his life story as a cautionary tale about the fleeting nature of wealth and fame. Though he later released more music, it was colored by his religious perspective, and his public identity morphed away from the flashy MC with parachute pants into a more grounded figure who recognized the limitations of material success. The story underscores the ways in which hardship can sometimes lead an artist to a stronger spiritual foundation and a willingness to leave behind the illusions that once defined a career. John Davis, another member from the nu metal world associated with Korn, also went through a period of deep soul-searching. While Brian "Head" Welch's conversion attracted a great deal of media attention, Davis found himself wrestling with many of the same existential questions. Although he remained active as a musician for much of his life, there were periods in which he removed himself from the usual routines of recording and touring to delve into his spiritual life. He read extensively on theology and took up personal devotional practices that shaped not only his worldview, but his approach to writing lyrics. A portion of his fan base grew curious about the transformation, and though he didn't always broadcast his faith journey as loudly as Welch did, it was a defining aspect of the internal shift that saw him leave behind the chaotic lifestyle that had once seemed inseparable from Korn's brand. Stories about artists who leave the music industry for God demonstrate that the power of faith can outweigh the allure of fame. Each individual faced different circumstances, whether addiction, disillusionment, health scares, or simply a profound sense that something was missing in their life. The unifying thread is the decision to prioritize spiritual conviction over the adoration of fans or the possibility of further hits. While some left abruptly, never to return, others found ways to reconcile their faith with continued involvement in music, albeit in a transformed capacity. The common theme is the pursuit of genuine fulfillment, an unwavering desire for inner peace that the bright lights of stardom could never fully provide. A deeper look into these journeys reveals complexities. Fans and critics alike often question whether the abrupt decision was fueled by a desperate search for meaning or a lasting revelation. Some artists like Mace and Brian "Head" Welch did make their way back into the industry at various points, albeit with an emphasis on their faith-informed boundaries. In other instances, such as Vanity or Dan Peek, the break was more final, and their lives took on entirely new forms centered around worship and service. Regardless of the outcome, their stories serve as reminders that success, even at its zenith, can prove spiritually bankrupt for those who feel called to something deeper. Personal sacrifice stands out as a common element. These artists gave up touring revenue, severed relationships with record labels, and sometimes alienated fans who wanted them to continue churning out the hits. Yet interviews and biographical details often show that these individuals felt an unshakable sense of peace once they aligned their actions with their beliefs. Instead of focusing on charts, they focused on devotion, personal growth, and in many cases, ministry to others. That transition brings both struggle and reward. The struggle to adapt to a less public life, and the reward of discovering a sense of belonging within a community of believers. Some stories resulted in partial returns to the music world. These comebacks were usually approached with new motivations, often channeling the artist's talent into gospel music or performances that carried positive messages. This doesn't necessarily mean they reversed their original decision to devote themselves to God, but rather that they found a channel for their artistry that complemented their faith instead of contradicting it. Many discovered that creativity itself is not at odds with religion. It can be a powerful avenue for expressing gratitude, devotion, and testimony. The difference is that their goals shifted. No longer was it about becoming the biggest star. It was about using a God-given gift in a manner consistent with their convictions. The human longing for purpose can be felt at the core of these journeys. With each step away from stardom, these artists illustrated that the pursuit of happiness is often complicated by fame's inherent emptiness. The rapturous applause might feel exhilarating at first, yet it rarely addresses the deeper questions about existence, meaning, and salvation. For some, near-death experiences or rock-bottom moments force them to confront those questions head-on. For others, a quieter discontent brewed, culminating in a conscious decision to chart a new course. In every case, the turning point was recognizing that worldly success cannot substitute for spiritual fulfillment. Examining these 25 stars illuminates how varied the path to faith can be. Some embraced Christianity, others Islam, while certain figures, like George Harrison, turned to Eastern spirituality. The details differ, but the overarching narrative is one of transformation. Public reception often ranged from applause to skepticism, yet the artists themselves remain steadfast in their commitments. Their stories serve as a testament to the fact that spiritual revelation can come at unexpected moments, sometimes shattering an entire identity built around music and fame. It shows how a single decision can ripple through an artist's entire life, affecting not only them but also the fans who followed their journey. The fascination with these figures springs partly from the boldness of their choices. Leaving a lucrative career is a radical act. Fans regularly see artists touting religion in interviews but continuing their careers as if nothing changed. In contrast, these individuals took tangible steps to alter their life paths, setting aside commercial benefits to follow a calling that can feel intangible from the outside looking in. That kind of conviction resonates with people, whether or not they share the same religious beliefs. It humanizes stars who once seemed larger than life, reminding everyone that behind the headlines and red carpets stand individuals wrestling with the same existential issues as anyone else. If there is a single takeaway, it might be that fulfillment does not always lie at the top of the charts. While society can't get enough of success stories, these artists reveal a different type of triumph: the courage to walk away when divine purpose beckons. Their journeys hold lessons about integrity, the weight of conscience, and the willingness to risk public standing for personal truth. Each narrative calls attention to the possibility that, no matter how glittering a life appears, emptiness can still take root. Yet the door remains open for faith to fill that void, potentially leading a person down a path that redefines what success truly means. Many of these musicians have shared in interviews that their new lives, whether spent preaching, singing gospel, or devoting themselves to religious study, feel more authentic than anything they previously experienced on stage. Though they often fondly remember their days performing for thousands, the internal peace they discovered in devotion to God eclipses the fleeting adulation of crowds. Ultimately, their stories offer a glimpse into the transformative power of faith, a force potent enough to draw artists away from the pinnacle of fame and guide them to a humbler yet deeply meaningful existence. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on stars leaving music for faith? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.